200 years ago, Blue Star's spiritual energy was revived. The ensuing catastrophe and racial war deprived humanity of the sea and the moon. The raging demons and disasters became humanity's nightmares. A strong explosion can be seen in a community in Jincheng as people run for their lives upon seeing a giant lava demon rampaging and destroying everything in its path. The police arrive and immediately take action. The police team leader of the trainee squad, Wei, shouts for everyone to seal the scene, rescue civilians, and cooperate with the Magic Defense Department to suppress the demon. Wei then calls our protagonist Renjie to remind him that they are on a mission and tells him to put in more effort. Renjie yawns tiredly, but replies to Wei that he knows. He then gets down from the police truck. One of the police officers asks Renjie what he did last night and if he went to the internet cafe to work the night shift again, but Renjie just shouts at him to shut up. Another teammate reminds him that he was the top scorer of the college entrance examination and yet works nearly 10 part-time jobs alone. The man asks him if he isn't tired, but Renjie responds by asking if they think he wants to work so much and if they would give him money to spend if he didn't. Wei furiously shouts for everyone to shut up and focus. He then tells them that if they, as trainees, perform well and successfully become regular members, they will have the opportunity to be injected with the Enlightenment gene medicine. He reminds them that each field mission's performance is recorded on their assessment report card, meaning the more people they rescue, the greater their chances of becoming regular members. However, Renjie states that he isn't saving people just to become a regular member. This makes Wei ask if he wants to be a hero, to which Renjie responds that, according to Article 13, Chapter 2 of Si Yao Hall's Rules and Regulations, anyone who rescues a person from a demonic disaster is rewarded with 200 yuan, with no upper limit. He adds that this clause also applies to intern team members. Wei hits him on the back of his head and angrily shouts at him not to risk his life for 200 yuan. Wei then reminds everyone that the prerequisite for saving others is to protect themselves and not to face demons directly unless they want to die. He also tells them that hunting demons is the responsibility of the Magic Defense Department, so they shouldn't interfere. The team members acknowledge his orders and focus on extinguishing the fire. Suddenly, one of them nervously calls Wei, reporting a situation. A woman rushes out from the smoke, shouting for help. She falls to her knees in tears, begging them to save her child, who is still in the building and hasn't come out. She cries that her child is only 5 years old. Renjie loudly asks Wei what the Magic Defense Department is doing and points out that a level 3 giant lava demon still hasn't been dealt with. Wei calmly explains that all the Magic Defense Department troops are outside the city on demon cleansing missions, and support won't arrive for a while. Right now, only a single girl from the Demon Hunting Academy is left fighting, and she is rumored to be favored by God. Wei immediately grabs his helmet and shouts to his team that he's going to rescue people. He orders them to provide support from the perimeter. Meanwhile, the child's mother desperately shouts that her son is on the 10th floor. Wei is shocked to see Renjie rushing into the building entrance. He shouts at Renjie, asking if he wants to die, reminding him that the demon hasn't been eliminated yet, and that it's extremely dangerous inside. However, Renjie continues running forward and reminds Wei not to forget the 200 yuan. Wei is left stunned in shock, wondering if Renjie is serious. He then shouts at the others to stop standing around and to hurry up and cool down the building to support Renjie. Inside the building, Renjie rushes upstairs. He kicks open a door and shields himself from the force inside, thinking that earning 200 yuan is really not easy. He sees the fire spreading but is suddenly shocked when a powerful blast in front of him and destroys the upper floor. The entire building shakes, but he manages to duck in time to avoid the debris. He immediately looks ahead, wondering if it was a soundwave attack. When he sees the demon fighting with a girl, he is shocked that the giant lava demon can actually release soundwave attacks. He wonders if the girl is from the Demon Hunting Academy, and upon seeing her clearly, confirms that genetic warriors are truly different. They can fight such monsters. Suddenly, he hears a child crying loudly, calling for his mother in fear. He rushes toward the sound and calls out to the kid. A few minutes later, he finds the child coughing due to the smoke. Renjie quickly reaches him and tells him to hold on, reassuring him that he has come to save him. Just then, the ceiling starts collapsing above them. Renjie shouts for the child to be careful and fortunately manages to grab him in time, avoiding the falling debris. Hearing the child coughing repeatedly, he takes off his mask, puts it on the kid, and tells him to hold on tightly. On the other hand, outside the building, the other police trainees were doing their best to extinguish the fire when Renjie emerged, holding the kid safely in his arms. Everyone was shocked, but amazed that he had made it out alive. They shouted excitedly, urging him to rescue their summer vacation homework. However, before he could react, a strong force erupted from the building. The demon barged out, still engaged in battle with the girl. She leaped into the air and launched her sword at it, but the demon managed to leap away just in time to evade the attack. It then took off at high speed, unleashing a powerful sound wave directly at the building. The impact completely cracked the structure. The girl immediately recognized the danger, but before she could intervene, the demon struck again, causing the lower floors of the building to explode. The entire structure collapsed, leaving everyone in shock. Their attention quickly turned to Renji, who was standing near the entrance. He looked back and in that moment, realized his fate. He was going to die. Calling out to Wei, he threw the child toward them, urging them to take the kid to safety. Wei managed to catch the child and called Renji's name in alarm, but it was too late. The building crumbled, trapping him beneath the debris. Afterward, everyone gathered around, calling out his name in tears. Unfortunately, he had not survived. A steel bar had pierced his chest, yet in his final moments, he found himself thinking that perhaps he had truly become a ghost. He wondered if he could still earn 200 yuan with his life, though he lamented that he wouldn't be able to spend it. The girl appeared before him, apologizing because he was about to die. He briefly wondered if she was an angel, but Zhang Juli only looked at him with pity and repeated her apology. As his vision blurred, he accidentally caught a glimpse of her underwear and questioned why anyone would wear piggy-themed underwear beneath a pleated skirt. A fundamental trust among people, he thought, had just been shattered. He muttered that the pink pig design was quite cute, which startled her. Furious, she called him a pervert, but her anger quickly turned to concern when she noticed he was slipping away. Panicked, she shouted at him to wake up, but he could no longer keep his eyes open. Renji wondered if this was what death felt like. A sense of relief washed over him at the thought of finally getting some rest. It felt oddly comfortable, yet his mind drifted to his aunt Aning. What would she do? What about Yao Yao? How long could she survive with the demon scar disease? With those thoughts, he realized he couldn't afford to die. He wanted to live. Determined, he willed himself to stand, resisting the pull of the dark abyss of death. Later, at the hospital, the doctor announced Renji's critical condition. His left arm required amputation, his lower spine had suffered a comminuted fracture, his internal organs had ruptured, and he had experienced massive bleeding. Multiple bones were dislodged, making his survival impossible. At 23:44, his heartbeat ceased, and brain death was confirmed. Upon checking his vitals, the medical team found no signs of life. Wei broke down in tears, apologizing to Tao Ran for failing to protect Renjie. With heavy hearts, they decided to cremate his body, unaware that his consciousness was still intact. Trapped in silence, he screamed internally, insisting that he could still be saved. However, his voice could only be heard within his pendant. His lifeless body was transported to the cremation chamber. He continued to call for help, but his voice remained unheard. Helpless, he watched as they placed him into the cremation machine. A wave of disbelief washed over him as flames engulfed his body. Were they really burning him? Had they truly given up on saving him? As his tears fell, they formed a rippling surface of water beneath him. He found himself standing on it, looking around in confusion. He questions where he is, and wonders if was this the afterlife. Suddenly, his pendant appeared before him. He recognized it instantly. It had been unearthed 10 years ago from the ruins of Jincheng's demonic disaster. Reaching for it, he recalled that he had originally kept it to preserve the memory of his family. Was it possible that this pendant was actually a treasure? As his fingers brushed against it, a brilliant light erupted from within, and the pendant fell into the water. He bent down to examine it but was stunned when the water surged upward, revealing a massive purple tree before him. He stared at it, bewildered. Why had a tree suddenly appeared? And why did it seem so strange? Cautiously, he reached out to touch it, wondering if it was demonic in nature. The moment his hand made contact, a powerful force burst forth from the tree. Panic surged through him as he demanded to know what was happening. A floating flame emerged, and a voice echoed through the air, declaring that the demon contract was complete. The contracted demon was identified as the Demon of Flames. The voice continued, revealing that the cost of demonization was making others cry. Shocked, he questioned the meaning of such a price, but the voice offered no further explanation. Instead, it stated that the price had already been paid. The process began, and the demonization contract was initiated. Meanwhile, outside, Wei put out his cigarette and asked solemnly if Renjie's body had been completely cremated. However, one of the men hesitated, noting that something was wrong. The body wasn't burning as expected. Confused, Wei turned back, demanding clarification. Before he could process the situation, the flames inside the machine intensified. A strange sound echoed from within, resembling a human heartbeat. The machine suddenly exploded. In a moment of sheer terror, Wei begged the Ghost King to spare his unworthy life. Then, from within the flames, a voice spoke, Renjie's voice, asking if there was a doctor nearby. Emerging from the wreckage, Renji stood with a transformed appearance. He grinned, stating that he believed he could really be saved this time. Then, he laughed. The next day, in the Huotian Biological Building, inside the laboratory, Renji woke up in his original appearance. Panic set in as he recalled the sensation of burning, making him question what was happening and whether he had truly died. A woman's voice interrupted his thoughts, telling him that she would be done soon and that he shouldn't move around. Confused, he asked who she was, but his words caught in his throat when he noticed her large chest in front of him and the sound of machines working on one of his arms. The woman reassured him not to panic, stating that he had just managed to reclaim his small life. Trying to remain calm, he asked again who she was and where he was. She introduced herself as Nuo Yan, the person in charge of the Huotian Biological Laboratory. She then explained that it was their Xiao Li who had brought him there. Informing him that the procedure was complete, she encouraged him to test it out for himself. Sitting up, Renji realized that one of his arms had been replaced with a robotic limb. Yan proceeded to explain that it was the latest all-purpose robotic arm. She added that the previous owner of that model had used it while conducting an explosion experiment with 10 pounds of TNT. Though the owner had been reduced to ashes, the arm had remained completely intact. Amazed, Renji asked who Xiao Li was and why they were willing to help him. Yan revealed that Xiao Li was none other than Zhang Juli, the third young miss of the Huotian Biological Group. Realizing that he had no knowledge of this, she curiously asked about their relationship. At that moment, he recalled that Zhang Juli was the girl favored by the gods. Yan then told him that he was extremely lucky. Not only had he survived, but he had also successfully unlocked his gene lock and awakened a flame ability. Surprised, he asked how it was possible since he had missed the period for gene awakening long ago. Yan clarified that he was already in the awakened stage, but to maintain his body through practice, he needed to understand the fundamental principles of a genetic warrior. Still confused, he asked her what those principles were. She explained that 200 years ago, 12 spiritual springs had appeared on Earth, causing the planet's environment to change. Animals and plants absorbed the spiritual energy and evolved into spirits, gradually dominating the world and attempting to wipe out humanity. In response, human scientists had successfully unlocked the genetic lock and developed a magical gene-opening drug. By injecting it into ordinary people, human genes awakened, allowing them to absorb spiritual energy and fight against demonic spirits. However, when humans gained power by unlocking their genetic locks, they also had to pay a price. Renji, now more curious, asked what kind of price she meant. In response, she brought up the example of demon scar disease. Recognizing the term, he told her that his little sister suffered from it. Yan elaborated that if someone under a demonic contract failed to pay the required price, magical marks would appear on their body. As the disease progressed, it caused unbearable pain, akin to having flesh and bones torn apart. This revelation made Renji think, was it possible that Yao Yao's illness was the result of being a demonic contractor? Seeking answers, he asked how demon scar disease could be cured. Yan regretfully informed him that, at the current medical level in Daxia, no cure existed. However, she mentioned that there might be a way to bring it under permanent control within the Dongtian demonic realm. Shocked, he pressed her for confirmation, and she explained that the realm was filled with dense demonic energy, which nourished demonic contractors. If a cure existed, it might be found there. Realizing that there was a chance to save Yao Yao, Renji felt a renewed sense of hope. Yan told him that she had already taught him how to operate his new arm, so he should go home and study it himself. She warned him that if he broke it, he would have to return to her for repairs. Bidding her farewell, he assured her that he wouldn't trouble her again. A moment later, in the street, he was walking and staring at his robotic arm, thinking that it was amazing and that if he didn't study it carefully, he wouldn't be able to tell that it was a fake hand. He figured that when he woke up, he had a bizarre robotic arm and had disappeared for a few days, which meant his Aunt Anning and Yao Yao must be worried, so he knew that he'd better go home first. He then moved his shoulder, feeling it hurt a little because the anesthetic had worn off. Minutes later, he arrived at their shop and saw people gathered around, chatting, making him wonder what was going on and why there was a group of people gathered around the door. He got closer and heard a fat man asking if they chose customers when they were doing business. The fat man told his aunt and little sister that he would give them 300 yuan to wash a pair of underwear and asked them if it was too little. Anning apologized to the man but firmly said that there was no such service, making the fat man laugh and shout that with their kind of service attitude in doing business, it was no wonder they couldn't even afford the rent. The blonde man then teasingly told them that if the business wasn't good, they should move out as soon as possible because their brother Wang, while pointing at the fat man, wanted their place. Yao Yao grabbed a broom in anger and shouted at them to get out of there, but Wang just grabbed the broom while saying that Chick Yao Yao was quite energetic and that it was boring to beat someone with such a thin stick. Wang then grabbed Yao Yao out of her wheelchair while teasingly telling her that he had a bigger one there and that he didn't mind letting her use it, making Yao Yao shout at Wang that he was shameless and to let go of her. One of Wang's minions was about to ask who they thought they were when someone punched his face and slammed the bald man into the ground. The other Wang minions looked back in anger and saw Renji with his robotic arm, angrily shouting at them to get lost. Still, the chicken-haired man launched his fist at him and shouted that he was looking to die, yet he was easily punched in the face and pushed aside. Wang shouted, asking who that kid was, but he just told Wang that he had heard everything he had just said. Wang aimed a knife at him and shouted that whoever he was, he shouldn't mess with his good work and warned him that he would stab him to death. Renji just grabbed Wang by the chin, breaking a few of Wang's teeth, and shouted at them to get lost. Wang let go of his knife in pain, and Renji snatched his little sister Yao Yao away from Wang while still lifting Wang with just one hand. Wang struggled to breathe, which Yao Yao noticed. and she worriedly stopped him. He noticed that if he continued, he would strangle Wang to death, so he let go of Wang, who slammed into the ground hopelessly. He then shouted at them to get out of there and warned them that they wouldn't be so lucky next time. The blonde man rushed to help Wang and told him that they should run, but Wang still called him a stinky boy and ran away while shouting at him that if he had the guts, he should just wait. When the bullies were gone, he looked at his human arm, wondering if the white mist was the power of emotions. He then entered their shop, and his aunt excitedly told him it was great to have him back. Yao Yao asked him what was wrong with him and why he seemed so weird, but he simply replied that he was fine. Anning then noticed his hand and asked him what had happened, but he just smiled and told him that from now on, no one would dare to bully them again. Yao Yao then excitedly told him that the punch he had just given was so powerful. He agreed and told them that he was so hungry. Anning rushed to the kitchen and told them to have a good rest while she cooked. Later at night, he was in his apartment resting in his bed, thinking that in such a short period, so many things had happened and his body had also changed. But then he felt a strong pain inside his body and felt his heart burning, making him scream that it hurt. The place around him then burned and turned into blood, making him panic and wonder what was going on. He then fell into darkness, making him feel extremely uncomfortable. He then saw the demonic tree with the floating flame, recognized it, and wondered why it was there. But then he felt that he had no control over his whole body and that something was being sucked out of him. The three then began sucking something from him, which caused so much pain and made him scream. The three then poured a dark power into his body. He felt unbearable pain without knowing that he was in the third stage of awakening. He then remembered that since the Dangtian demon realm had eroded the 5 spiritual springs into demonic springs, demonic energy only existed in the demon realm. If a demon contractor wanted to cultivate and advance to the next level, they had to rely on demonic energy. However, he hadn't expected that in a world filled with spiritual energy, demon spirits could actually transform spiritual energy into demonic energy. He knew that the prerequisite for this transformation was consuming a large amount of emotional power. He also recalled that Yan once said that the negative emotions of human beings were called the demon's original sin, and that this was where the power of emotions came from. Once the emotional power available to the demon spirit was depleted, the demon contractor would be affected by the demon's original sin, and the price would have to be paid in time. Therefore, they had to obtain fresh emotional power. Otherwise, their willpower would be devoured by the demon spirit, and they would become a real demon. The next day, in the street, he was walking while holding his phone and texted Yan, asking what would happen if a demon spirit demanded a price from a demon contractor, using the excuse that a friend had asked. Yan replied that it varied from person to person and provided examples. The demonic spirit could control people to watch a few R-rated movies for 3 days in a row, exhibit strange behaviors like pulling out their own fingernails, and other actions that seemed to be related to their personal growth experiences. Frustrated after reading this, he realized that all the emotional power he had stored before had been overdrawn by the demonic spirit, meaning he needed to find a way to obtain more emotional power to feed the demon. However, he didn't want to do anything weird. As he walked, distracted by his phone, a girl suddenly appeared beside him and bumped into him, falling to the ground. He noticed that she was wearing a short skirt with long legs, and an urge arose in him to lift up the bottom of her skirt and take off her underwear to use it as a mask. Snapping back to reality, he questioned himself, shocked by his own thoughts. The girl softly apologized, explaining that she had been too anxious and hadn't noticed him. However, he suddenly became irritated and shouted at her, asking what the police were for if an apology was enough. He then abruptly demanded to know her 3 measurements and the color of her underwear, even ordering her to take it off and let him see. His words shocked everyone around them. The girl was stunned, wondering what was wrong with him, and if he expected her to use her body to make amends. She then calmly stood up and whispered that there were too many people around. She suggested that they go somewhere more private where she could do whatever he wanted. At that moment, something inside him snapped. He felt a sudden surge of energy and realized he was having obscene thoughts again. Slapping his head in an attempt to clear his mind, he wondered if this was the price he had to pay to the demon. Without another word, he turned and ran away at full speed, completely shaken. The girl, surprised by his reaction, shouted after him, asking why he was the one running when she should be the one escaping. Once he was away, the girl answered a call. The person on the other end addressed her as Chen Hua and asked how things were going, specifically whether Renjia's aura was definitely that of a newly awakened demon contractor. Hua, making sure no one was watching, changed her appearance into a demon and replied that she had let the kid escape. However, she was certain that he was the person the tarot card had been looking for. The person instructed her to find an opportunity to test Renjia's ability, but warned her not to let him get away again. Otherwise, they wouldn't get any useful results. Hua reassured them not to worry, confidently stating that Renjia couldn't escape from her grasp. Later that night, Renjia was walking through the streets near the clubs, counting his money. Frustration filled him as he realized he had only made a few hundred yuan from his part-time job, blaming his damn noisy emotional powers for his lack of focus. Just then, a woman ran into him and hugged him. Startled, he shouted at her to let go and demanded to know why she had thrown herself into his arms. The woman, however, acted as if she recognized him and complained about his poor service, stating that his BB driving service was getting worse and worse. Confused, he explained that she must have mistaken him for someone else because he was not a driver. She dismissed his words, claiming he was talking nonsense and asking if he was afraid she wouldn't pay him. Without waiting for a response, she handed him cash, telling him to take it and help her get in the car quickly. He counted the money and, realizing the situation, thought that since it had already come to this, there was no reason he couldn't take over the driving replacement. He then helped the woman into the car and assured her that he, the BB driver, would serve her wholeheartedly. A moment later, as he drove, he casually commented that the place she lived was quite remote, making it inconvenient for her to go to a bar and drink normally. She ignored his comment, instead mentioning that she felt extremely hot and asked him what he thought they should do, claiming she was about to explode from the heat. He simply told her to fasten her seatbelt. However, she suddenly reached out and touched his leg, surprising him and making him shy. Despite his initial reaction, he managed to stop her hand, causing her to ask if he had always been this insensitive. He, however, redirected the conversation, questioning whether the direction she had pointed to was truly correct since the area was so deserted and whether her family really lived there. She pointed to the side and told him to just stop there. He obeyed her and stopped the car. He then looked at her and asked why, but he was shocked when he saw that her melons were closer to him. She asked him why he was still looking so distracted when, in that wild mountainous country, it was just her and him. Yet he told her that he was doing serious business, so he couldn't do the job of unclogging sewers. She then held his face and told him that the more he acted like that, the more she wanted to eat him, making him say that the 2,000 yuan was really not easy to make. He then panicked when he saw the lady's eyes turn black. He forcefully pushed her away while shouting that he was not a casual person, but she still wanted to take away his first kiss. The lady was pushed to the side, and he looked at her when he heard her stutteringly apologize. But he was shocked when he saw her head split into 7, making him loudly ask what the hell it was. The lady then shouted that she wanted to eat him one bite at a time and attacked him with her split heads. Fortunately, he managed to grab her in time to stop her, and when her saliva dripped on his face, he screamed that it was disgusting. On the other hand, another lady was standing by the huge gallon next to the car. It was Yue, saying that it had finally been revealed. Yue then jumped off and threw a blade onto the top of the car, which pierced through and slashed half of the lady's split heads. He immediately got out of the car while cursing loudly and asking what was going on. The blade pierced into the car, then got bigger and cracked before exploding, cutting the car in half. Suddenly, Yue and 3 more people appeared behind him, and in front of them was the demon lady with split heads. The lady slowly put her head and face back together while telling Yue that the Magic Defense Department was meddling in other people's business again. Yue called the lady Chen Hua and told her that she couldn't escape tonight, but Hua simply asked if she had ever said she was going to run away. He cursed loudly in frustration and asked them what was going on. He then shouted that he was just a part-time worker, so he shouldn't be exposed to such a big scene. Yue, however, told him not to make a big fuss and to find a place to hide. A man told Yue that they should bring both Hua and Renjie back to headquarters, making Hua smile. Suddenly, someone attacked them at high speed. Fortunately, he ducked down in time to avoid it, and Yue and her team jumped away to dodge it. He then heard a man speaking to Yue, saying that he really didn't know what their section chief's expression would be when he found out that their 3rd squad had been eaten alive by him. Yue recognized him as Li Zhan. Zhan told her that they were just there for Renjie today, and that they should leave while they still had the chance, as it wasn't too late. Yue, however, confirmed that they were really after Renjie. Zhan ignored Yue and told Renjie to follow him and join the Demon Claw organization, claiming that whatever he wanted the Demon Claw could give him. He was confused, but Yue warned him not to believe Zhan, explaining that if he joined the Demon Claws, there would be no turning back. Renjie stood up and casually said he would like to ask something first. Zhan told him that he was making the right choice because in that world, apart from the Demon Claw, there was no place for demonic contractors. He added that the Magic Defense Department would only drive them away like rats crossing the street. However, Yue explained that although the world had many prejudices against those with demonic contracts, the Magic Defense Department would never take action against him because of his identity, as long as he could use his power correctly. Zhan shouted at Yue to stop talking nonsense, arguing that giving Renjie empty hope was useless because it wouldn't change reality. Yet Renjie simply asked if the Demon Claw organization had an internship period, if working overtime included overtime pay, and if they provided the 5 insurances in one fund. Zhan was both shocked and confused, while everyone, including Yue, was left speechless. Hua furiously asked him if he was trying to be funny and if he thought they were some kind of proper organization. He replied that if it wasn't a proper company, he wouldn't go, making Hua even angrier. She then told Zhan to stop wasting time and bring Renjie back first. Zhan transformed both of his hands into huge, sharp blades and declared that he would deal with the little bastards from the Magic Defense Department first. He then jumped toward them at high speed and launched his blade forward. However, Yue managed to block it with her sword and told her team to leave Zhan to her while they dealt with Hua. They all agreed and then rushed toward Hua, shouting for her to surrender without a fight since it was 3 against 1. Hua, however, calmly asked them what they meant by 3 against 1 and told them to watch closely. She then formed hearts and placed them on the ground. Sharp objects emerged from the hearts and monsters with blades on their backs were born from them. She then ordered them to peel off their skins because she was going to make a human skin mount. Meanwhile, Yue and Jean were fighting in sync on the side, blocking and countering each other perfectly. Jean taunted Yue, asking if that was all she had and teasing her that there was no thrill at all. Angrily, she responded that he was celebrating too soon. She then turned her blood sword into liquid blood and threw it at Jean as a blood explosion. However, Jean blocked it with his arm blade just in time and managed to stop himself from being pushed too far back. He then teasingly shouted that it wasn't enough and changed his blade arms into sharp claws. On the other hand, Renjie was running away, thinking that if he had known things would turn out like this, he wouldn't have taken that life-or-death substitute driving job. He knew that Aning and Yao Yao were still waiting for him at home, so he hurriedly took the opportunity to slip away. However, he stopped in his tracks when Hua appeared in front of him with her split head again. She then launched her split face skin at him, making him scream in fear. He then shouted to Hua that he really had no interest in her while his chest burned with fire, but Hua shouted back that she couldn't wait any longer and would swallow him alive in one bite. Yue called out to one of her team members, Yejun, to quickly protect Renjie, but Yejun replied that they were stuck. Yue then forcefully pushed Jean's blade away and rushed toward Renjie, shouting at Hua not to even think about getting in her way. Hua was wrapping its face around him, but Yue was still in the distance. Fortunately, his demonic power activated, releasing a strong fire that caused an explosion, destroying the nearby establishment. Yue was shocked upon witnessing it, while Hua screamed in pain, clutching her face. Yue wondered how it was possible, knowing that only those with divine blessings could harm demons, and questioned why Renjie could hurt them. Hua then shouted to Jean that Renjie had ruined her face, demanding that his skin be peeled off. She urged Jean to stop dawdling and take Renjie away. Jean then rushed toward Renjie, declaring that those who stood against him would die. He claimed that he could no longer care about anything else and would halt them first. Yue immediately put her hands together, casting and activating her divine manifestation, Blood Moon Skies. She then aimed a huge blood spear at Jean and released it, fortunately hitting him in the stomach. However, Jean simply grabbed the blood spear and pulled it out, laughing as he praised Yue's power. He acknowledged that her attacks were strong, as expected of a divine vessel, but insisted that he was much stronger. Jean then activated his demonization, Thousand Blade Demon. Yue jumped back to create distance and ordered Yejun and the others to protect Renjie while she held them off. Jean then launched his claw using his Ghost Blade skill and told Yue to face her death. She countered by launching her blood spear, but it shattered into pieces, sending her flying backward. Jean taunted her, calling her pitiful and saying that another divine vessel was going down. He teasingly asked if she was scared, but Yue only urged her team to hold on, reassuring them that reinforcements were on the way. Suddenly, Jean pierced his sharp claw into her stomach and mockingly asked what reinforcements she was talking about, saying they would never arrive in time. Jean then pulled his hand out of her stomach, letting her fall to the ground, bleeding. Yue's team panicked upon seeing her down and worriedly asked if she was okay. They began asking each other what they should do next, where the reinforcements were, and what was happening to Renjie. Meanwhile, flames surrounded Renjie as he overheard them saying that Yue had ordered them to keep him safe. Someone then asked if Renjie was a demon contractor. Meanwhile, inside his realm, the demon tree held him and asked if he was still struggling. It then told him to surrender to the will of the demon, but he refused, knowing that he couldn't. He then recalled a saying, "The long blade ignites in flames, a fleeting brilliance. Where the blade reaches, even the stars bow down, saluting the eternal blazing flame." On the other hand, Jean called Yue's teammates a bunch of ignorant fools. He then rushed toward them and easily defeated all of them with a single slash of his claws. Everyone was down on the ground while Yue struggled to stay alive. Jean then grabbed Renjie by the neck and lifted him up. Hua asked Jean if she was right in saying that those who were alive couldn't be brought back but that the dead should still count as completing the task. However, Jean asked her in return whether Renjie was still the one they were looking for if he died so easily. Jean then shouted at Renjie, demanding to know if he was truly a demon contractor and provoking him to show his power. Jean was then shocked when he saw Renjie releasing flames. Renjie then unleashed a powerful fire explosion that pushed Jean away. Despite this, Jean managed to remain standing. As the smoke cleared, Yue was shocked when she saw Renjie. Jean, looking at him in the middle of the smoke, shouted in disbelief, asking how it was possible. Renjie stood there with a different appearance, his demonization form, the demon of flame. He then swung his flaming sword in Jean's direction. Jean managed to dodge the flame slash just in time, yet he could still feel the intense heat radiating from it. Calling them insignificant insects, he demanded to know how they dared to be so presumptuous in front of him. Now down on the ground, Jean wondered how this was possible and realized that the overwhelming demonic energy emanating from Renjie was something they were familiar with. Yue, who was being helped by her team, couldn't believe that Renjie's power was strong enough to push Jean back with a single move. Renjie then gathered his flame power in his hand, drawing in both Jean and Hua in the process, causing them to panic. However, Jean suddenly realized that this power might belong to the Demon King, and Hua confirmed that Renjie was the very person the tarot card had been searching for. Yue, hearing this, wondered if the tarot card was truly looking for Renjie. Renjie then declared that enraging him meant only death awaited them. Clenching his fist, his flames hardened, forming sharp tendrils that pierced into Jean and Hua's bodies, making them scream in agony. Jean, in desperation, called upon the great Demon King, shouting that the task was complete and that they had found the person he was looking for. Hua, however, only screamed that she didn't want to die. Unfortunately for them, the flames consumed their flesh slowly, burning them alive. Renjie watched them burn calmly, telling them they were nothing more than ants, mere sacrifices for the Tree of Demons. He then unleashed a powerful burst of flame around him, forcing Yue and her team to shield their faces. When the heat subsided, Yue managed to open her eyes and was shocked to see Renjie back in his original form before he collapsed. Yue rushed to him while her team anxiously asked what was happening to Renjie. She replied that it seemed the demonization had worn off, so they needed to check on him quickly. They surrounded him, and Yue confirmed that he was still alive. One of the men then told Yue that Renjie was too dangerous and asked how they should handle him. She responded that it was connected to the tarot card, meaning it wasn't a simple matter, so they should take him back to headquarters first. The man was about to carry Renjie, but Yue noticed that his wounds were more severe than expected and suggested carrying him herself. Yue then ordered her teammate Yejun to take care of Yung Xiao, to which Yejun agreed, saying he would contact headquarters to check on the reinforcements. However, another man bitterly remarked that he was used to it. Reinforcements always arrived only after the battle was over. Suddenly, Yue was shocked when she felt Renjie's hand squeezing her chest. Furious, she threw him to the ground and called him a pervert. He looked back at her, seeing her practically flaming with anger, and panicked. He quickly asked if she would believe him if he said it wasn't intentional, but she only called him a dirty pervert. Yet, even as she scolded him, she couldn't help but wonder how he had recovered so quickly after demonizing. She was amazed by his self-healing ability and suspected that the demon he had made a pact with was no ordinary one. Renjie then casually stated that he had nothing more to do there and that his family was waiting for him for a meal, so he would be leaving. Yue, still covering her chest, shouted for him to wait, explaining that for safety reasons, it was best for him to return with them to headquarters. However, he responded that he didn't think it was necessary and swore that he wouldn't join whatever Demon Claw organization they were part of. He added that they weren't even very familiar with each other, then began walking away. Before he could get far, someone suddenly appeared in front of him. Yejun, approaching with an angry expression. Seeing this, Renjie instinctively took a step back in fear, only for Yue to seize his collar from behind. Furious, she called him a pervert again and demanded if he really thought she was giving him a choice in the matter. A moment later, Renjie found himself in their car, shouting in frustration that he wanted to file a complaint. Angrily, he acknowledged that going back with them was one thing, but then demanded to know why they had all ganged up on him. His protests, however, were met with silence as they simply ignored him. Then, his consciousness dragged him in front of the Tree of Demons, and he was surprised to see the demonic spirits of Jean and Hua within the tree, making him wonder why they were there and what was going on. Blood then seeped from his body, making him wonder if those two demons also expected him to feed them. However, he knew he couldn't afford to do so. He then felt his body burning up and screamed in pain as blood and flames erupted from within him. A moment later, he snapped back to reality and accidentally farted inside the car, making Yejun ask if he had just farted. Sweating, he awkwardly replied that he needed to use the restroom and couldn't hold it anymore. They led him into a nearby public restroom while Yejun and the other man waited outside. Noticing that he was making a lot of noise, the man warned that if he didn't come out soon, they would rush in. Renjie hastily replied that he was coming out now. Someone then exited the restroom, but it was an old man. The old man coughed as he walked past them while the man shouted at Renjie that once they got to headquarters, he could use the restroom as much as he wanted. When he still didn't come out, Yejun asked why he was taking so long. The old man walked forward and disappeared behind one of the houses without them noticing. Renjie then removed his old man disguise while the men outside joked about whether he had fallen into the toilet. Feeling proud of his ability to adapt, he peeked at them teasingly and asked if they were really trying to catch him, warning them not to even try. He then escaped as quietly as possible, leaving the two men still thinking he was in the restroom, threatening to break in if he didn't come out soon. The next day at the Magic Defense Department, the chief was shocked upon hearing their report, and angrily asked how they had let Renjie escape despite being in a group. The Magic Defense Department chief, Shenxi, admitted that she never expected Renjie to be the one the tarot cards were looking for. Yue then told Shenxi that regarding the incident, she would take full responsibility. Shenxi asked how she planned to do so and ordered her to give the command to capture Renjie immediately. However, Yue pleaded for 1 day to provide an explanation. Shenxi agreed but warned that she only had 1 day, then ordered all information on Renjie to be classified as top secret. Yue acknowledged and confirmed her understanding. Shenxi then shouted at them not to stand around and reminded them they only had 1 day. They quickly responded, "Yes," and rushed to move. Once outside the chief's office, Yejun asked Yue where they could find Renjie, but she only smiled in response. Later that night, Renjie finally arrived home and stretched his body, thinking about taking a hot bath since he was exhausted. However, he suddenly heard a man inside their shop shouting that anyone who dared to offend the Shanhe group was in danger. He panicked, realizing that more trouble had arrived, and rushed toward the shop. As he got closer, he saw men running out, yelling that the woman inside was too fierce. One of them frantically asked where his tooth was, saying that she had kicked it out. Then, he saw Yao Yao standing there with a broom, shouting at the men, daring them to cause trouble again. This left him confused. Yao Yao then noticed him and asked why he had only just arrived home. Instead of answering, he asked if she was the one who had driven them away. Yao Yao replied, "No," and explained that it was her girlfriend who had been waiting for a long time, making him even more confused. He asked her what she meant by her girlfriend. Then, he heard a familiar voice saying that he was finally back. It was Yue, waving at him. He asked how she had found the place, and she replied that she had been there for a while. But since those men were looking for trouble, she had taken care of them. He then dragged her away, telling her that she was really persistent, and that if she had something to say, she shouldn't say it there. Anning then turned to Yao Yao and commented that Renjie was really something. He was already grown up, yet he was still shy about having a girlfriend. However, Yao Yao dismissed the idea, saying there was no way her brother was shy, and instead wondered if he was just avoiding taking responsibility. A moment later, they stood on a high ledge when he told Yue that if she had a problem, she should bring it to him, but she shouldn't involve his family. She responded that he was misunderstanding something and told him to look at how beautiful the night scenery was. He then asked if she had come all this way just to admire the night view so late at night. She explained that after the Great Cataclysm, human civilization was nearly destroyed, and the Gene Warriors emerged. They fought against the monster race, the spirit race, and the Bloodway demons while rebuilding the 33 main cities of the Great Tower. She then asked if he didn't want to do something for himself and his loved ones. She then offered him the chance to join the Magic Defense Department, telling him that it would give him better opportunities for growth. After thinking for a moment, he told her that he admired them for protecting the country, humanity, and sacrificing their lives. However, he was different. He only wanted to protect his home and those closest to him. She replied that she understood and acknowledged that he worked hard to treat his sister's illness. Then, she asked him, what if she told her that the Magic Defense Department has the ability to cure your sister? This shocked him, and he asked her in disbelief if she meant that the Magic Defense Department could heal Yao Yao's demon scar disease. He then shouted at her that it was impossible and told her not to lie to him because suppressants could only temporarily slow down demon scar disease, but they couldn't remove it. However, she calmly explained that she was not lying and that there was a spirit medicine called lantern grass, which had the ability to remove demon scar disease, but the Magic Defense Department was still researching it. He was stunned in surprise and asked her again if the medicine was real, to which she guaranteed that it was and assured him that she didn't joke about such things. Smacking the bar, and told her that if it could cure Yao Yao's illness, he was willing to join the Magic Defense Department. She immediately accepted and told him she would contact him and arrange for his registration. He then waved goodbye, telling her not to worry and that he would be ready whenever they were. As she watched him leave, she thought to herself that he was sly. She then called Shenxi to report that Renjie had been settled, but there was a condition. When she explained the condition, Shenxi was shocked and shouted at her, saying she could allow the suppressant but questioning if she really dared to promise lantern grass, emphasizing how precious it was. Shenxi then angrily declared that her team's budget for the next quarter would be halved, leaving her speechless. The next day, he arrived at Xiao Hall, thinking that his daily routine would continue as usual. As he headed to work, the Magic Defense Department still tried to take advantage of him. He walked past the police in the hallway and headed to his office. Wei asked why he had just arrived, while his colleague excitedly told him that a major problem had occurred. He placed his bag in his locker while asking what the major problem was. His colleague then asked if he had been specially recruited as a student by the Demon Hunting Academy. Renjie then noticed a letter in his locker while Wei excitedly told him how lucky he was, explaining that if he passed the test, he could enter the academy. However, Renjie casually rolled up the paper and tossed it away, saying he wasn't interested. Wei was shocked and asked him what he was daydreaming about, urging him to go there immediately. His colleague agreed with Wei, telling him that if he went to the Demon Hunting Academy, he could become a professional demon hunter. But Renjie dismissively asked who cared about being a demon hunter and stated that he just liked being with everyone. However, his decision changed instantly when his colleague mentioned that the commission for a single mission as a professional demon hunter could be at least a few $100,000, and sometimes even millions. He immediately grabbed his colleague by the collar, shouting at him to tell him the test location faster. Later he arrived at the Xiao Officer Test Training Hall, knowing that to enter the Demon Hunting Academy, he first had to pass Xiao's officer test. He thought it wouldn't be a big deal. He then asked Wei why there were so many test candidates that year, and Wei replied that he had the same feeling because he heard there was a manpower shortage, leading other departments to come there to poach people. The host noticed Wei and asked if he was bringing a new batch of recruits for the test. Wei sarcastically asked if the host would lose his job if he didn't bring people, making the host laugh. The host then jokingly told Wei that with his age he should just retire, as he was only an old martial artist, not a gene warrior, and questioned the point of him charging into the front lines. Wei ignored him and told Renjie and another man to give him some face, which they both agreed to. Just then, Renji noticed Julie in the crowd and wondered why she was there. Julie also recognized him and stared at him. The lady she was speaking with asked if she knew Renjie, but Julie simply replied, no. A moment later, the host asked the candidates what the motto of the Xiao officers was, and they all responded in unison, Xiao ignites us, to guard the city ablaze with lights. The host praised them, and then announced that the test would include a bonus of 30,000 yuan for the highest total score. Their first test was barehanded rope climbing. The man next to Renji proudly declared that this was his specialty, but Renji remained quiet, staring at the huge wall in front of him. The host then instructed everyone to get ready and shouted for the test to begin. The men next to him immediately rushed to the ropes and started climbing, leaving him behind. Renjie then grabbed the rope and jumped, instantly getting on the top. He apologized to his competitors, telling them that he would be going first. His competitors noticed his robotic arm and immediately shouted at an officer, claiming he was cheating. The lady next to Julie was shocked that no one was monitoring Renjie's actions and commented that he had installed a mechanical arm with such advanced functions. She then asked Julie if it was her brand, but Julie was speechless with frustration, realizing that he was really using it. The host was stunned, realizing that the rules never explicitly stated that mechanical arms were not allowed. He then announced that the test results would stand, making Wei laugh and comment that the dirty brat had finally given him some face. Renji celebrated his victory while his competitors, unable to believe his arrogance even after cheating, warned him not to get too excited too soon since there were still more tests to come. They told him to wait and see. The host then announced the next test, the 3,000 meter weighted rescue run. He explained that they would have to carry a rescued individual while completing a 3,000 meter long distance run, ensuring the person's safety throughout. Renji glanced at the mannequin, thinking the task would be easy. His competitors quickly hoisted their mannequins onto their backs and rushed forward as the host signaled the start of the test. However, as soon as Renji picked up his mannequin, it suddenly broke. He cursed loudly, questioning why the mannequin was so fragile. He then noticed his competitors had already gained a lead. Wei shouted at him, asking why he had used so much strength and telling him to quickly find another mannequin. However, the host explained to Wei that the test hall did not provide extra mannequins and that failing to complete the 3,000 meters within the given time frame would result in disqualification. A lady in the crowd laughed, saying that Renjie was doomed since he had broken his own mannequin. However, Julie suddenly noticed that Renjie was running towards them, which caught the lady's attention as well. Julie was stunned in shock and shouted, asking what he was trying to do. Renjie then leaped onto their table, sat in front of Julie, and asked her, without a mannequin, if carrying a real person to finish the test should still count. He then held Julie's hand, making her angrily ask what he was doing and ordering him to put her hands down, but he simply apologized and told her he was just going to borrow her. He then lifted her, making her shout in protest, demanding to know what he was doing. He began running across the field, quickly passing the other competitors who had started first, making them wonder how he could carry a real person, and if it was even allowed. Julie closed her eyes in embarrassment and begged them not to look at her because she was just a fake person. Wei laughed loudly upon seeing it and shouted to Renji that he always surprised him. The host checked the rulebook and saw that carrying a real person was allowed. A moment later, the host told everyone that the final assessment was a simulated rescue and explained that they were now inside a disaster-struck building where the rescued individuals had been injured. They needed to treat them and take them safely out of the danger zone. The injuries of the person in front of them included a crushed right leg, a penetrating abdominal wound, excessive blood loss, and a state of shock. The host then shouted for the assessment to begin. Renji told Julie not to be afraid because he would definitely save her and to hold on, but she just told him to stop talking nonsense and finish quickly. He then lifted her foot and told her that he was going to start by stopping the bleeding in her leg, and that since she was in shock, he needed to restore her heartbeat, making her notice that he was quite serious. He then positioned his hands on her chest, making her shyly ask what he was doing. He replied that he was restoring her heartbeat and needed to perform CPR. She warned him that if he dared to press down with his hand, she would chop it off. He then held her face and moved closer to her mouth, telling her that she had lost too much blood and that he still needed to perform artificial respiration, making her even more shocked as she told him that whether he believed her or not, she would beat him until he couldn't breathe. He confidently told her that as a Xiao officer, he would never allow a single living being to pass before his eyes. She then sat down and told him that if he kept talking nonsense, she would leave. But when the time came and he failed the assessment, he shouldn't blame her. He was surprised but agreed with her, then told her that if an examiner asked whether he followed the prescribed procedures, she couldn't say that he didn't do it. Later, they were all back in the training hall, and the host announced that all the assessments were over. He then said that the overall performance of that batch of candidates was good, and just as he was about to announce the results, they heard an emergency alarm, shocking the host. They all knew it was a major demonic disaster alert, making them wonder if the assessment was over or if it was actually a hidden assessment event. Wei rushed back and shouted to everyone that a major demonic disaster had occurred in District 49. The level of the demonic disaster was unknown, but it covered a wide range. Wei then called Team 7 and ordered everyone to set off immediately, which they all agreed to, shouting Xiao's motto repeatedly. Meanwhile, in District 49, explosions shook the area as buildings collapsed. A man shouted to his team to run away, yelling that it was an undead dog. They rushed back to their truck, but fortunately, reinforcements arrived. The man then shouted to Wei that he was finally there. Wei called the man Ma and asked about the situation, to which Ma replied that it was a G-level demon disaster with the potential to escalate to an F-level, involving 4th-ranked undead dog demons, but the number was unknown. Everyone was shocked to hear that it was a 4th-ranked demon undead dog, but Renji didn't know about it and asked if it was really that powerful. Ma explained that the undead dogs had strong regenerative abilities and that any severed pieces of flesh would transform into new undead dogs. He also said that each head had different abilities, making them terrifyingly strong. Wei acknowledged the severity of the situation and asked Ma if the people from the Magic Defense Department had arrived. Ma replied that he hadn't seen them yet, so he had focused on evacuating the wounded first. Wei praised Ma and ordered him to go to the medical treatment area quickly, while leaving the rest to them. Wei then informed his team that the situation inside was still unclear, so they would work in pairs, and if they discovered trapped civilians, they should immediately report their position and wait for rescue. He warned them not to show off and to prioritize their own survival. He then asked if they heard him, to which they all responded with a firm yes. Wei then hit Renji on the head, asking him if he heard the instructions and warning him that if he got himself killed again, he wouldn't be lucky enough to survive. Renji replied yes and told Wei not to worry about him. Suddenly, another explosion appeared in front of them, and from the smoke emerged a demonic figure. They immediately identified it as the undead dog, and it was coming their way. Wei immediately ordered them to retreat and hide. The undead dogs rushed to chase after them, and one managed to get dangerously close to Wei. It opened its mouth, ready to bite his head off, but at the last second, Renji slashed its head off in time and killed it with his flame power. He then revealed his robotic arm and flaming body. His colleagues were relieved to see that it was him, and he then faced the undead dog king. Wei shouted at him to run away and told him that he didn't want to have to pull him out of the crematorium again. But Renji just told Wei to leave that place to him and lead the others to rescue people. He then teasingly addressed the undead dog, saying that in front of him, it was nothing but a trash, and ordered it to shake his hand like a dog. However, the undead dog simply opened its mouth to devour him and growled loudly, making him angry as he shouted back at it that it was rude. He then jumped to dodge the undead dog's attack, activating his flame demon ghost blade and slashing the undead dog's head in half with a single swing. He then aimed his sword down at the severed head. His colleagues couldn't believe what they were witnessing and asked if this was still the Renji they knew and if he had really killed the undead. However, Wei shouted that they were wrong and warned him to be careful because the undead dog would revive. Renji, however, just shouted for them to get out of there quickly. The undead dog's body then began to regenerate, forming 2 heads instead of 1. He was shocked to see it, as he hadn't expected that even cutting off their head wouldn't stop their regeneration. One of the heads lunged at him, but he managed to block it with his blade. He then shouted at the creature that he would turn it into mincemeat and see how it could regenerate from that. He unleashed John's power inside his body and activated the blazing 1,000 blades. He then slashed at the head near him and jumped, shouting that he would chop it into minced dog meat. Moving at incredible speed, he slashed the undead dog repeatedly, turning it into mincemeat that rained down onto the ground. Yue, watching from above, thought that he was quite capable and understood why the academy wanted to recruit him. She then speculated that Renji had learned how to use the demonic power inside him. With that, she jumped down with her team and ordered them to assist. Renji noticed Yue and 2 men descending from above and sarcastically asked why the Magic Defense Department was always so late. He then told her that she should talk to her chief about getting a raise. However, she simply asked him what he called himself and reminded him not to forget that he was also a member of the Magic Defense Department. He dismissed her comment, saying they should leave him out of it since he hadn't officially joined because they had yet to give him what he wanted. Yue then shouted to her teammate Muchuan to be careful as the undead dog was coming back to life. She asked if he was okay, to which Muchuan replied that he was already moving as fast as he could and asked her to cover him. Muchuan then began casting his spell, releasing his power onto the minced remains of the undead dog scattered on the ground. However, the pieces of the undead dog suddenly regenerated into multiple new undead dogs, all of which lunged toward Renjie. He immediately activated his demonic power, releasing a powerful wave of flames around him, once again shattering the undead dogs into pieces. Laughing, he taunted them to come at him again. Yue, however, realized that they were dealing with infinitely regenerating creatures and that they could only be completely destroyed through magical techniques. She quickly asked Muchuan about the situation. Muchuan replied that he was ready and opened his eyes, preparing to unleash his magic. He then released his power around them, and his curse of the witch god lifted every single undead dog into the air. Renjie looked up, wondering if it was a magical technique. He then watched as Muchuan caused the undead dogs to explode one by one in the air, until only scattered remains fell to the ground. This time, the undead dogs did not regenerate. Renjie was amazed by the sheer power of the technique. Unbeknownst to them, someone was watching from above. It was the Ghost King, releasing an ominous and powerful demonic aura. A man beside him commented that the effects of the demon disaster had turned out quite well, especially with the undead dog. The Ghost King, Luo Su, responded that it was all thanks to that brute acting as bait, and then asked if the list had been compiled. Yuanpei replied that they had gathered all the names, the demon contractors in Jincheng, the newly awakened genetic warriors, and even some individuals with special abilities. Su praised Pei for doing a great job and took the list from him. As he read through the names one by one, he paused, finding Renjie to be rather interesting. On the other hand, Renjie absorbed the grief, anguish, fear, and emotions of humanity around him, knowing that they would all serve as nourishment for the Tree of Demons. A moment later, when the fire had been extinguished and peace returned to the devastated area, reconstruction began, and doctors tended to the injured. Renjie walked to the side and saw Wei sitting, knowing that he had been a Xiao officer for many years, witnessing countless lives lost. Yet every time a demonic disaster ended, he still found it difficult to remain calm. Wei added that it was the job of a Xiao officer, and in the end, there were very few who died a good death. Renjie approached and asked how he was, making Wei cough in surprise before responding that his old bones weren't dead yet. Wei then advised him to leave and go to the Demon Hunting Academy to further his studies and become a demon suppressor, saying that he would have better opportunities for development. However, Renjie asked if it wouldn't be better to remain a Xiao officer and save people from disasters. Wei called him silly and told him that no matter how many people they saved, it would never be enough. He explained that being a Xiao officer couldn't prevent the occurrence of demonic disasters. However, if Renjie became a demon suppressor, hunting down demons and stopping demonic disasters at their source, it would be far more meaningful than simply being a Xiao officer. Renjie then told Wei that there was something he had always wanted to ask him. Wei asked if it was about the Jincheng Grade A demonic disaster 10 years ago, saying that it was a memory he didn't want to recall. However, he still went on to explain that 10 years ago, creatures from the Dengxian demon realm had poured into Daxia, destroying cities one after another. Wei suddenly stopped and asked why Renjie was bringing it up after all these years. Renjie replied that the demonic disaster had an important connection to his life and that he had been trying to figure it out. Wei noticed his serious expression and asked what was going on, but Renjie simply said it was nothing and that he was just curious. He then waved goodbye to Wei, saying that he would be leaving first. Wei shouted after him, reminding him not to forget what he had said about going to the Demon Hunting Academy. Renjie responded that he would consider it. Then, he shouted back at Wei, reminding him to apply for his bonus later because he had rescued 341 people, which would earn him 68,200 yuan and a medical subsidy of 100,000 yuan. Wei called him a brat. A moment later, as he was walking while the other reinforcements were inspecting the area, he received a call. When he answered, it was Yue, telling him to come to the Magic Defense Department the next morning because the chief wanted to see him. However, he refused, saying they hadn't given him what he wanted. Yue then told him that if he came in person, he would receive 3 Huaxing Demon Scar Suppressors, 100 pain pills, a portable in vitro ion dialysis machine, a green card from Jincheng Shenwu General Hospital, and free medical care. He immediately called Yue a princess and asked if he could be there at 8 in the morning. He also apologized for provoking her earlier, even offering to let her whip and punish him mercilessly tomorrow. She simply hung up, thinking Renjie was mental. The next morning, he arrived at the location Yue had given him. He walked into a corner, checked the address on his phone, and wondered if he was right to trust that Yue wouldn't mess with him on purpose. He noticed that the place didn't look like the headquarters of the Magic Defense Department. As he reached a secluded street, someone told him he was pretty punctual. He turned around and was so shocked that his nose started bleeding. Yue was standing there in nothing but her bra and underwear. She asked him what was wrong with him. He apologized but told her that it would be disrespectful of him to look away just because of how she was dressed. She walked past him, calling him weird and telling him to follow because the headquarters was just up ahead. He followed her and asked if she usually dressed like that and if she didn't feel cold. She responded by asking how it could possibly be cold in the summer and told him to stop talking nonsense and walk faster. He complied, but then asked why he couldn't see the headquarters if she had said it was right there. She explained that the Magic Defense Department's headquarters was underground, and all the surface branches were just clerical offices meant to fool people. However, he pointed out that what they were looking at was obviously a garbage dump. Yue simply touched the wall next to the garbage and pushed it, revealing an elevator. Renjie was stunned. She stepped forward and asked if he was coming in or just going to stand there. Still speechless, he followed her into the elevator. As he stepped in, he couldn't help but glance at her chest, and commented that while he now understood that the headquarters was underground, he wondered if her outfit was also meant to fool people. She was confused and asked what he meant. He then asked if there were no rules about dress codes in the department. She told him that there weren't any rigid rules, so they could wear whatever they wanted. He covered himself and muttered that a large company like this was impressive. Innovative at first glance. He admitted that working there might not be too bad, but hadn't expected Yue to be so open-minded. When the elevator doors opened, Yue walked forward, telling him that they had arrived. However, as he stepped out, he was even more shocked. Every single person in the headquarters was dressed in nothing but their underwear. Renjie was speechless. He started to think that the Magic Defense Department was a little too magical. He then recalled how, when he worked part-time as a male dancer at a KTV, he had actually worn more clothes than everyone here. Looking around, he couldn't help but wonder if this was just part of the company culture. Yue, who originally had clothes on, noticed him staring and asked what he was spacing out for. She then told him not to keep the department chief waiting, to which he replied that he got it. He then thought that he needed to quickly fit in and integrate into the group, so he told her to hold on. He then began to undress, making Yue panic and ask what he was doing, but he calmly reassured her not to worry because he was almost done. He then took off his pants, revealing his pink boxers, thinking that deeply understanding company culture meant fully embracing it. Yue was shocked as she watched him undress. He then proudly laughed and told her that he didn't seem so out of place anymore. The employees who were originally dressed normally wondered what was going on with his brain, where he came from, and why he was taking off his clothes. Everyone watching burst into laughter, calling him a streaker and a pervert, while others recorded videos. Yue approached him and asked what was wrong with him, but he simply replied that it was nothing, and told her that he had just felt out of place wearing clothes there, but now he felt much better and was ready to go. Yue slapped her forehead, not even knowing what to say, but ultimately decided to just move on. She then clicked the chief's office doorbell, and Shenxi told them to come in. They walked inside while Yue informed Shenxi that Renjie had arrived. Shenxi, who was sitting, stood up in shock upon seeing him. Renjie, in turn, was amazed to see Shenxi because he hadn't expected even the minister to dress like that. He then noticed that Shenxi had an incredible figure, wearing only a black bra and underwear, with a tattoo on the side of her belly. Shenxi asked Yue if they had searched Renjie, but Yue replied that they hadn't conducted a search on him, making Shenxi remark that young people these days were really open-minded. She then told Yue that she could leave because she needed to talk to Renjie alone, to which Yue responded with understanding and left. Shenxi then greeted him and approached while introducing herself as Minister Shenxi. She then asked if Yue had already briefed him, but he remained quiet, staring at Shenxi's chest. Shenxi noticed his gaze and asked him what he was looking at. He quickly replied that her tattoo looked nice, making Shenxi confused as she asked him what tattoo he was talking about. He snapped out of it upon hearing her question and stuttered, saying it was nothing. He was certain that he had seen a tattoo. It was clearly there. So he wondered if there was something wrong with his eyes. But then, he was suddenly shocked as he began to wonder if they had been wearing clothes the entire time. He then felt something rise inside him, forming next to the demon tree. Recognizing it instantly, he knew it was the Tree of Delusion. He noticed its leaves releasing a liquid, and suddenly realized that it was the gene serum injected into him back at Xiao Hall. This made him wonder if it meant the genes in his body were awakening. He then touched the delusion tree, and the Eye of Delusion was activated. He wondered if this meant he had unlocked a new genetic skill, one that allowed him to see through things. And then, it hit him. This had nothing to do with company culture. They were all wearing clothes. Shenxi asked what was wrong with him, making him snap back to reality. He suddenly realized that he had stripped down in front of everyone on his first day at the Magic Defense Department. Worse still, he had walked across the entire hall wearing only a pair of underwear. Horrified, he shouted in panic, asking what the heck was going on and begging for help while covering himself. Shenxi looked at him confused, as Yue immediately rushed back inside and asked what had happened. But before he could explain, he suddenly sneezed and yelled for them to quickly turn off the air conditioning because it was too cold. A moment later, after he had calmed down, Shenxi handed him something, telling him that it was a token of sincerity from the Magic Defense Department. She reassured him that they didn't mind his identity as a demon contractor and encouraged him to join them because they believed he would have better development and resources there. He accepted the gift but immediately asked where the lantern grass they had promised was. Shenxi replied that they had already arranged for someone to retrieve it from the Dengshin demonic realm and that they should be back soon, so he shouldn't worry. He then asked if he was right in thinking that the Magic Defense Department had allocated so much manpower and resources just to recruit a low-level Xiao officer with no real power. Shenxi responded that they weren't recruiting him just because he was a demon contractor. He was special in other ways as well. He took out his pendant and asked if that was the reason, but Shenxi simply told him that he already knew the answer. He then told Shenxi that he didn't trust the Magic Defense Department and didn't want to get dragged into trouble. Shenxi asked if he understood how terrifying things would become if his demon engraving was exposed. He replied that this was exactly why he didn't want it. He then told her that she could take back the engraving in exchange for 5 lantern grass, but if that was too much, 3 would do. However, Shenxi only laughed and told him he was thinking too simply. She then explained that the demon engraving had already fused with his body, and unless he died, it would only condense again. He was shocked, asking her if this meant he was doomed to die. Shenxi responded that if he wanted a chance at survival, he had to join the Magic Defense Department. He asked if she was saying that he had no choice, but she simply asked him back what he thought. She then explained that joining the Magic Defense Department was his only way out, and that he should let all of Great Xia become his support, drive out the demons, and become a true hero among men. She then threw something at him, and it stuck to his ear. That's the end of the video. Let me know your thoughts and if you want the next part.